This is Lesson 7. A common feature in most any Adobe application is the ability to create and save your own custom workspace. A custom workspace is basically a snapshot of the panels that you have open in your work area, as well as their positions and their scaling within that area. As you work more with the application, there may be certain tools and panels that you tend to prefer that you use more than others. So eventually you may say, well, I want to put away certain things I'm not using and only keep open the things I need so that I can keep my screen organized and save screen real estate where it applies. You may also find that different sets of tools and panels apply to different types of tasks. So depending on the type of project or movie you're working on, you may want to be able to recall a specific configuration of panels and tools just for that particular job. The nice thing is you can create as many custom workspaces as you want. So let's take a look and see how we can do that. We're going to get started by opening up the fl07_video.fla lesson file. And there's nothing much going on here, just some graphics and text on the stage. But what we're really going to focus on is what panels we need to work with this particular file or other files down the line. In other words, what is our preference and how would we like our workspace to look at any point? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out how to pull out only the things I need and maximize my screen real estate so I have more room to work. On the right-hand side, you may notice that the Property Inspector and the Library panel take up a good deal of screen real estate. Depending on your screen resolution, in the case of mine, it's pretty much almost a fifth of the screen. So what I'd like to do is first of all minimize these so that they're still there, but they're not taking up quite as much room as they are now. This is pretty easy, and how I'm going to accomplish this is in the upper right-hand corner of most any panel group, you'll see this little icon here, which is Collapse to Icons, or Collapse to Icon View, as it's called in some other applications. So I'm going to go ahead and click that, and that's going to bring those two panels down, minimize them so we only see their icon view there, and that saves a lot of space right off the bat. The next thing I'm going to do is figure out which panels I actually don't need and get rid of those panels and take the panels I do and place them in areas that are convenient for me to work with them. So first things first, what we're going to do is expand this default panel group here, which appears in the Essentials workspace, and when I do that, we get to see everything that's hiding under there. Specifically, I see that I have my color and swatches panels up here, my align, info, and transform panels, my code snippets, components, and motion presets panel down here. Now, one thing I know is that I'm not working with code snippets right now. Components don't really benefit me in this movie, or I just haven't learned to work with them yet, and my motion presets are something that don't apply to this movie because it really isn't utilizing any animation. So right there, those are three panels or an entire group I don't need. So what I can do is, rather than closing these panels one by one, if they're part of a group, at any point, regardless of which panel is active, I can click the panel menu in the upper right-hand corner, and an option I always have is Close Group. So I can either close the specific panel, the active one, or the entire group that it's attached to. In this case, that's exactly what I want to do, so I'm going to choose Close Group. The next thing I'm going to do is keep panels that I need and maybe move them to different positions in the workspace. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my Align panel forward. And this is pretty handy, and I use this quite often. And for the type of movie I'm working with here, we actually have a lot of different shapes on the screen that were positioned that way using the help of the Align panel. Chances are I'm going to have to use it again pretty soon. However, I'd like the Align panel to sit on a different portion of the screen. I'm actually used to having it on the left, and that's the way I like to work, and that's no problem. What I'm going to do is actually pull it out of its group here by clicking on its tab and dragging it off to the left. And I'm going to just pull it here so it sort of snaps to the left edge of the screen. Now what I can also do is, if it's overlapping my work or if it's just taking up a lot of room, I can scale it to a degree. And I can do this by moving my pointer over to the right edge of the panel, clicking and dragging as much as I can. Now you'll see I don't really have a lot of room because at a certain point it doesn't let me do that. But I can also pull it out, so it's just good to know that some of these panels can be scaled. Can also do that from the bottom as well if they're just dead space at the bottom, which some of these panels have. With my Align panel placed, what I'm going to do is go over to my Info panel. Now, I'd like my Info panel to actually sit below my Align panel. It gives me information that I need and is something I use quite often as well. So what I'm going to do is click and drag the Info panel out of the group by its tab. Now, what I'd like to do is have it sit directly below the Align panel, and I want to make sure it kind of snaps in place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it up here, and I'm going to slightly overlap with the bottom, and you'll see I get this blue line here that shows up on the bottom of the Align panel. Once I do that and release, it actually automatically snaps the Info panel directly below the align panel. So that's convenient. We don't have to try and do it manually, which can be a little bit messy. On the right-hand side, transform panel, don't need that. Don't really use it too often, and I prefer to use the free transform tool. If I really need to do a numeric transform, I can always reopen this on a case-by-case basis, but it doesn't need to occupy space in my work area. So in the upper right-hand corner, I'm going to click its panel menu there, and I'm just going to simply choose either close or close group. It doesn't matter because it's the only panel in the group. And once again, what I'm going to do is, now that I know what belongs in that group, and at this point it's just the color and swatches panels, I'm going to collapse these back down to their icon views to open up space again. Now at the bottom, my timeline and motion editor, these are important, and I may use these later. Even though I'm really not using any animation right now, the timeline serves a lot of different purposes. So I definitely want to keep that open, but again, I'm not doing multi-layered animation or anything that complex, so what I may do is resize this a little bit, and I'm going to do that by moving the pointer and the gap in between the actual stage area and the timeline and motion editor panel group, as we see here. And once I get that double arrow, I can click and drag, and I can resize just like this, and then bring it down as far as I can and release. So I've got a pretty nifty work area here, and I think I'm going to keep this. And to keep this, all I have to do is just save this as a new workspace, a new custom workspace. So to accomplish this, I'm going to go up to the window menu, and under the window menu toward the bottom, I'm going to choose the workspace option. So what I'm going to do is toward the bottom of that menu, I'm going to choose new workspace. Now what this does is it opens the new workspace dialog box, and all I have to really do here is just enter a name for my new workspace. So I'm going to go ahead and call this basic layout workspace. And that's essentially what it is. Most of the tools and panels I've chosen here are conducive to creating layouts and not really something else like animation or action script heavy movies. So I'm going to go ahead and press OK. And I've got my new basic layout workspace. And we can see that right up here in the top right hand corner. And we can also see it if we go to the window menu and go back to that workspace menu. So custom workspaces are a really powerful feature. It's recommended that you look through the workspaces that ship with Flash CS5, and you can modify those and then save them as your own custom workspace or create your own custom workspaces from scratch. It seems like a very minor thing, but it can make the difference between a fairly choppy workflow and a really smooth, intuitive workflow.